I'd like to now go on and mention the final keyword. If you haven't used final before, then this keyword is used actually in two different ways. We can declare variables to be final, and that's the example I've got on screen here, but we can also declare classes and methods as final. Now I'm going to expand on what this means in a moment, but for now, we can think of this as meaning that final variables cannot be changed. Final methods cannot be overridden by subclasses, and final classes cannot be subclass. So you can't inherit from a final class, and if you're inheriting from a class but it has a final method, well, you can't override that method. From a performance perspective, declaring variables, methods and classes as final is generally seen as a good thing, because in theory, it allows the Java compiler to potentially optimize the code. Now, you may not necessarily see a noticeable improvement in performance, but it certainly won't in any way be detrimental. If you're interested to know what the optimization is that the compiler can make, well, it's something called inlining. In simple terms, if, for example, an integer is declared as final, say with a value of 7, well, as this value cannot be changed, when the compiler compiles the code, every time our integer reference appears, rather than the compiler having to say, look up the variable of this value, well, it can just insert the number 7 instead every time it's referenced. Now, I'm saying that this is a potential optimization. It may not always be possible, and the reason for that is because of how the final keyword really works. I'm going to forget about final methods and classes and just focus on the final keyword when it's used to declare variables, because that's the bit that is particularly relevant to us right now. So let me give you the real meaning of the final keyword. And that is not that the variable can never be changed, but that the variable can only be assigned once. Once the variable has been assigned, it can never be altered. This is the closest thing we have to a constant in Java. It's not quite the same as a traditional constant that you might find in other programming languages, because we can change the value from uninitialized to having a value. So for example, the code that I'm showing you on screen here will work fine. But the point of the final keyword is that if we try to change its value, in this example assigning it a new customer, well, this second line of code would give us a compile error. The actual error message we get in our IDE is final local variable C cannot be assigned. It must be blank and not using a compound assignment. The second part of that compiler error message is rather horrible, but at least we understand the first part. We can't assign the final variable C, and that's because it has already been assigned once.